Thank you for visiting our channel. Please subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button. You can also click on the bell, which will notify you by email when a new video is posted. That way you're able to stay in touch with us and get the latest updates.
Welcome to Lunch and Learn, guys. We are so thankful to Ann Carlson Center for providing our space. My name is Shalomir. I'm the president of Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. John Cody doing videography. Today's topic will be about homeschooling your kiddo on the spectrum. I have to say that I've been homeschooling for 10 years. Thanks, Molly. And I have kids that are in public school. I have kids that are homeschool. I have kids who have done a mixture of both. There's no better way to school. I think the best way to school is whatever is best for your own child. And forming a relationship. If you do have a kiddo with Asperger's or autism that needs services from the school, you can still participate in speech and OT. You can have them do extracurriculars. You can still be as involved as you want to in the school. So don't count that out as an option if you are looking at homeschooling. I would like to introduce my panel. This is my tribe, the lovely supportive women that we support each other as we go through our homeschool journey. This is Mary Fries.
Hello.
She homeschools her two daughters. You want to tell us about?
I homeschool my two daughters. The oldest one I homeschool is 14 and she's a freshman. And then I also homeschool a 7th grader who is 12. They initially started in public school. We initially started in Bismarck, moved here 6 years ago. So my youngest started out in the West Fargo public school system and she went 1st through 4th grade. And then my older one did 1st through 6th grade till we brought them home. So.
And you had two who graduated from public school.
And I've got two who've also graduated from public school. I have a 26-year-old and, well, actually 27, and a 21-year-old who went all the way through public school. And 21-year-old is set to graduate from college and go on to grad school. So.
Can be successful doing.
Either way is successful.
Erin Gordon.
I'm Erin Gordon. I have 4 children. And this is Selah, my daughter, with me today. And she has only ever been homeschooled. For Selah, we started in Vermont and we homeschooled successfully there for a number of years, and then Minnesota as well, and now finally North Dakota. And it's been an incredible experience. My 3 stepsons are in public school, and they are thriving and really enjoy the experience there as well. I have just a different perspective today, having started and done it in several states. The paperwork, though intimidating, is certainly doable, and hopefully we can work through some of that.
And this is my daughter, Molly Lemire. Molly is a senior at Fargo North. She was homeschooled for 6 years, did a mixture of homeschool and regular school. I can't even draw a stick figure, and she's very artsy. Yes, Molly? Oh, 8 years. It all kind of flows together. Yeah. We were saying, what grade are you in? Bobby, my 17-year-old son asked me what grade he's in. Because we don't focus on grades, we focus on mastery of the information. So I guess we have in the back information if you're from North Dakota and you're interested in homeschooling in North Dakota. Information I took off of the North Dakota Homeschool Association website. Just a little brief overview about what the law is in North Dakota. If you have a GED or a high school diploma and you're a parent, that's all you need to teach your own child. There will be standardized tests that are done. If you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, you can opt out of standardized testing. For my family, we have opted out of standardized testing because my kids don't test well. And for me as an educator, that's not very helpful for me to know what I need to do to improve their education, which is what I kind of thought the standardized tests were for. So we don't do those. I just kind of get a feel of what they know. I guess she's now Bobby because Molly's back in public school. Through conversation and working with him every day. There's also in here information. There's a lot of support if you homeschool. We are fortunate enough to have found each other. There are Facebook groups, lots of people in Fargo-Moorhead homeschool. There are secular groups, Christian groups. So they're all out there. You can look on Facebook. There are also, one of the pages that we have in the handout is how to look at some resources if you're homeschooling your kiddo with special needs. Because there are certain, I don't know, benefits that are available to you if you do homeschool a kiddo with special needs. And then there is the letter of intent, which is the last page, which is what you would need to turn into the school district. How many do we have here from North Dakota? Most from North Dakota. If you homeschool in North Dakota, what you need to do is fill this out with your child's name, your high school diploma, or your diploma from college to prove that you have the qualifications to teach. If they've never been in public school, you're going to need to include the proof of immunization. If they've been in public school, they have that. And then you can indicate on here what classes you want them to take at the school if you're interested in doing that. We had Molly take art classes.
They can also participate in extracurricular.
They can participate in extracurricular.
Even if they are not taking a class in public school. It's state law that they can still participate in any extracurricular activity that the school offers.
My son gets support through vocational rehabilitation from the high school, and he does not take any classes in the high school. So you do have that available. And then you take this and make a photocopy always. And you want to make sure that you get it to the homeschool coordinator in your district. If you're in West Fargo, that's at the Ladone Center. I believe Tom Gravel is still the homeschool coordinator. Yeah. Tom Gravel. He's also, I think, the superintendent of the alternate high school there in Ladone. And what I have learned to do, because I homeschooled in West Fargo, I would take my letter of intent in, I would have the secretary sign it and date it and make a photocopy, and I would get the signed copy that she had, and they would put it in the file. Because we did have our paperwork get lost once.
You can also send it registered mail, which I do because I don't have the time to drop it off.
Yeah.
Either way, they're wonderful to work with. This is our third year, we've never had an issue. One of the things to remember though with that, you have to submit that 14 days before you plan on starting to homeschool.
Right.
So that's
So if you're planning,
important, but
yeah, because they do actually have police officers who will come out to your house and check to make sure that your kids are getting a proper education if you don't do the paperwork properly, which I think is actually great to protect the kids. So I know that we've got some who are just starting homeschool who turned in a letter of intent. Going to be pulling the kids out in a couple of weeks. Then we also have, for Minnesota, it's a little bit different. Have to do the initial report to the superintendent, and then you have to do an updated report every year. The letter of intent looks a little bit different, but you just turn in to each district, follow your state laws.
Minnesota requires every year testing, do they not?
A nationally normed, yes, exam, and they ask for it in the initial paperwork, and it's okay to write on the initial paperwork, I will decide this at the time. And there's a few that you can pick from, and maybe we can get into that a little later, but it's not overwhelming. I brought the information for the testing that we use. We pursue kind of a more formal education with Sailor, so we test every year for her, and it's a very easy process, and it's not difficult to meet the requirements. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly a bunch of options for those kind of tests.
We used to do the standardized testing when the kiddos were younger. And the school, if you want your kiddo to take the standardized test, you can have them go to the school for that, or you can order the Iowa CAT and pay a teacher to moderate that test.
Actually, you no longer have to do that. You now, with the last legislature, you now have the option to opt out of standardized testing in North Dakota, regardless of your education.
That's great. See,
And that just happened last legislature. So I actually paid, we don't need it, we didn't need it last year, but I paid someone to do the standardized testing and turn it into the school system regardless. And we choose to do the standardized test even at home with me administrating it, just as a benchmark for my kids every year to see where they're at and if we're missing something, because you're with them all the time, but yet you still might miss something. And we found out we were missing writing, even though we write every day. We're still missing that piece. So it's great to do.
It's fun to not do it.
Yeah.
And you're your kid's teacher.
Yep, and it's like $35. It's not a lot of money. Do it, don't do it, it doesn't matter anymore. As long as you put on the letter of intent that in North Dakota that you would like to opt out. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering, is the school then still responsible to do like 3-year evaluations? Do you do any testing prior to, like if there's special needs, then you like to use that for IEPs and then?
We had a case manager when Bobby was younger, in the elementary school when he was homeschooled, and he would go in for services, and he would still have his testing, and that's just the relationship that you're going to form with whoever is the resource strategist at the school that's within your area. You can still have those services, yeah, and they'll provide those free of charge. Okay. So I didn't know if you wanted to just ask us questions,
It's like buddy.
Or no, and
Or,
I brought up.
She's got a presentation, it's however you guys would like.
which would you prefer? Do you want to continue to have us blast information at you, or would you like to ask questions?
Maybe both.
Maybe both? Okay, fine. Well, I will let Erin take the floor then.
Excellent.
She likes this.
I do, and it's kind of fun because I remember hearing someone speak the other night, and they said that they were an INFJ, and I too am an INFJ, and so it's always a personal challenge to come up and then do a presentation, so I try to do it when I
You need to
can.
speak up, Ed.
Speak up just a little bit, it's a, we don't have, that kind of,
Acoustics.
yeah, thank you.
So Selah is in grade 9, and we chose to follow a traditional grading system with Selah. She is not on the spectrum, but our home is a neurodiverse home. And what's beautiful about homeschooling is it really is whatever you want it to be. And that seems very broad when you're first starting out. And it's hard when you want specifics, but there's so much to choose from. Or the best news, and I think this is something that you noted, it really is whatever is important to you. And when you're first starting out for Selah in kindergarten, that's not a very expensive year. It is a lot of interaction, or it was for Selah. How do we make this a part of our lives? Vermont has a different paperwork system, so we were required to do reporting, required to turn in lesson plans and have them approved, and then at the end of the year, show that we had followed them. And so we were excited when we moved to Minnesota, and we no longer had the requirements that we did in Vermont. So when we filled out the paperwork at the beginning of the year and submitted it, finding the testing for Minnesota was the hardest part. And I choose the Iowa Basics every year. And when it's not a required year for testing, in North Dakota they used to have, I think it was grades 6 and 8. And
4, 6, 8, and. Yeah.
So for Selah, last year she was in grade 8, she did go in and take the exam at Discovery. And I picked it, they mailed it to me, I just was required to take in the sealed envelope. And the teacher opened it there and went through it with her. In Minnesota, I administered the exam in my own home and then sent it to the University of Minnesota. They graded the exam and then we paid for an analysis. And just as Mary said, it was always so that I would know if she was missing some part of her education. And if it's not something that you have to do, you can carefully consider which exam you would like to choose. So the Iowa Basics are comprehensive and they look really good on a college application. The CAT exam is another big one. There are a few others to choose from, but I liked that it went through everything from all of language arts all the way through to reference materials. And she did beautifully. And being able to start her testing in the home was a nice transition to, okay, now you're kind of in the middle of a school where there's bells going off,
So it's the same sort of process, just in a new environment. And she did adapt to that beautifully. And I think we could all attest to the very first thing that people say when you're homeschooled is, but what about socialization? Or, can they handle a situation where they're in a formalized setting? And of course they can, because that's how they will be raised. It will just be something that you do. Homeschoolers learn everywhere. And I have yet to run into a homeschooler who doesn't just participate in all levels of society. So they're not in a room with their peers, they're in the community. And so that's something that not only I have noted in Selah, but others as well. She interacts just as well with peers as she does with adults, as she does with younger children. So our day has always had a little bit of structure. Selah, I do take a lot of time to pick her curriculum, and that can be overwhelming at first. And when you have resources and you do online, you would know your child best. And if you want maybe a more hands-on learning experience, you can Google whatever subject you're looking for and try to find one where it's maybe less formalized instruction and more child-led. For Selah, we used Spectrum for language arts in elementary school, or I should say primary school, and then transitioned into, there was a guiding set of books, and it's called the Core series, and it would say what your child needs to know in this grade. So what your kindergartner needs to know, what your first grader needs to know, and so on, up through 6th grade. And then I would build off of that and bring in experiences and books as needed. And so each day, now that she's in grade 8, this is what her day looks like. And I know this is hard to see, but this is 2 days. And this is just my own lesson plan for me to keep organized. And so I know this is, sorry, embarrassing to say a lot, but I always start out the day with circle time, because that's what we did in kindergarten, and it's just a transition time. Because it's hard to sort of say, okay, we're goofing around and it's morning time, and we've just we're still in our pajamas. We've absolutely done that. It's a transition to now we're gonna start learning. Because the goal for every parent is to open as many doors as possible. And for me, that meant teaching her when it was time to really tune in. When is the situation where now we're flipping the switch from total play to, I think, just as fun, but learning time. And now the first subject that we head into is Spanish. So she's taking Spanish 1. And for Selah, she's also an athlete. She's a fencer, so she fences on the national team out of Fargo. So Fargo Moorhead Fencing Club's national team. And so for her, we also have an NCAA requirement. So keeping her eligible as an athlete, which is something that is really available to you as a homeschool student. They even have a homeschool athlete kit for you so that you never have trouble making a transcript. And when you do the NCAA transcript, that's going to be perfect for your kid for college. And they let you do a formal curriculum system, but also if you're going to teach for Selah, her art requirement will be an accumulation of all of her experiences throughout her whole high school career. And then we will note that just simply, here's what we did on this day, and she will write a short synopsis of what we did. Because we work on writing. I was like, she knows how to write.
We work on writing too.
And then she moves into, she does Algebra 2 and Biology, English 2. She has Western Civ 1. She has a Religious Studies course this year. And then her physical education requirement, we did a formal physical education curriculum so she could say, how long is a soccer field? Things like that. And then it's not very much fun playing dodgeball by yourself. But so we would go to a ton of community activities. And she's always participated in a lot of classes. At the level that she wanted to. She was always the kiddo in basketball or in soccer who just wanted to hold hands with her friends and kind of run up and down the field, which was fine. But it wasn't until fencing that she ever really wanted to compete. And so adding that travel in was easy with homeschool. And we have absolutely done lessons at the base of the dinosaur and in Chicago O'Hare when we're changing planes. And we always kind of joke, only with homeschool. So, and so you don't have to organize your day this way. And it may seem rigid, but it's only because, as I was joking with Shell, something can happen. I have 4 kids. My schedule is blown apart in 2 seconds. So if I know what I'm going to do that day, if we need to pack up algebra and head to another place, or someone's got a game out of town, it's doable. I know exactly what we're going to do. We take those books with us, and we have the most incredible time doing that. So the portability, especially so much is online, I actually prefer, because I'm 100 years old, I prefer books. So I buy a lot of textbooks versus having them on her iPad or on the laptop or something like that. But also when we are at a cross-country meet in the far reaches of North Dakota and there is no Wi-Fi, we can still move through curriculum and not miss a lesson. In North Dakota, there is still the 180-day requirement, and so I also just track that here. And keeping these records means that at any time were we to be randomly chosen for an inspection, I always know what we did on any given day. I pick the curriculum each year, and when I can't decide or when I don't know, there is a homeschool store in Elk River called Hepner's Homeschool Legacy, and I brought some of their paperwork. But those are the most, the woman who runs that store homeschooled her daughters, who are now, I think one of them has just achieved her doctorate. They were incredibly successful, and she was an educator herself. And walking in there is, you just walk into the biggest homeschool hug, because the first thing that people usually do when you say, hello, this is Selah, she's homeschooled, is they tend to slow down their speech or say above her head, but what about the socialization? She probably doesn't know how to interact, and they will usually say that in front of her. Anyone that meets Selah knows that she is very well spoken. And then they will say, I had no idea. This happens a lot. She seems so normal. I think, huh. Well, I'm sure you would usually keep that to yourself. Another thing that will happen as a homeschooler is an instant quiz. Yeah. The second they find out that Selah is homeschooled, whoever it is going to quickly quiz her on whatever subject they think that she should know. And sometimes, so coming up with responses to that, it gets to be funny now, but at first it was offensive.
It was frustrating at first for us. And when we did Meals on Wheels, because we do a lot of volunteering. Yep. Someone asked Bobby, why aren't you in school? And Bob was with his autism, he's very quirky, and he looked at this person and he said, I am in school, the world is my classroom.
Right, who could say it better than that? I always wanted to respond and say, well, what is it that you think that she should be learning? Clearly you have assessed her instantly and maybe there's something she's missing. What would you like her to learn?
I think people don't understand that when you're talking about the subjects, we do have certain requirements that we have to teach if you're teaching that are required. You have to teach, for instance, for high school, Bobby's in high school, you have to teach 4 years of English. You have to teach the sciences. You have to meet the same graduation requirements for the same classes that public school does. So they're not just going off willy-nilly. You still have to get that information into them. And you have to record it, because when Molly transitioned to public school, I took all of our paperwork to the principal at Fargo North, and he went through all of our paperwork, and he put all of Molly's homeschool curriculum then now on her Fargo North transcript. So she has a complete transcript, and we saw, okay, Molly, great, you need to do this, this, and this, and then you'll graduate in the school system. And it was a little bit different because I learned a little bit more about my paperwork. I didn't necessarily have it all as neat as the principal would have liked. So it was a great learning experience for me, for Bob. But it's seamless because you're teaching them the same information with different curriculum that works for your kid, because that's the thing I love about the individualized curriculum. So they're learning the same kinds of things that the public school kids are. Can you speak to that, Molly, when you went to public school?
Yeah, there were some things that when we brought my curriculum in, it went from the principal and then to my school registrar, and then she had to verify. So there were some things that didn't transfer completely. So I did have to, I retook a year of English, just because we had different parameters for our English.
We studied literature, and they did not want literature. They wanted more mechanics.
So I wrote a couple more papers. Now I went and I took my paper to my guidance counselor, and my career counselor, and she says, wow, that paper is really good. I think you can submit that to a scholarship. So I'm
Mom is
learning
really
all
big
of
on
these
writing.
things because I've worked on them in homeschool and I've worked on them in public school. One thing, if you're going and you're thinking homeschool as something you might want to do as something in your maybe elementary and middle school years, you have to be careful about maybe the curriculum you're choosing, because it doesn't all transfer. And that repeating, I did have to take a couple of summer school classes. So I took summer school English 3 and summer school geometry last year, and they don't offer unlimited summer school classes. So I almost had to retake another year of summer school, and that would have pushed my graduation.
Well, Molly was unique in that she had some health issues, so she was behind in that. She actually is taking another year. She's was scheduled to graduate last year, but she has a chronic health condition, so she will graduate this year, which is a wonderful thing about homeschooling too. You know, when we were trying to find out what was wrong with Molly when we didn't know what her illness was, and she was laying on the floor in the dark because she had migraines and she couldn't keep her eyes open, there was no way that would have worked in public school. And the next day, if she's able to work, then she comes and she does her work. I've always prepared my lesson plan for the week.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I want you to get done. And now Bobby, if he screws around because he's a 17-year-old kid with autism and he gets very easily distracted, he knows he's going to have to do his homework on Saturday or Sunday because it has to be done for the next week. And if it's not, there are consequences. You lose your electronics. Or you have to go do something really nice for someone else. He just hates that. So go shovel a neighbor's driveway. Oh, I should have done my government. Yes, you should have. So I just wanted to say that they're learning the same kinds of information.
And so when our homeschooled kids usually operate in public and they're instantly quizzed, when you walk into that particular store, you're instantly among friends. I've never run into someone that uses the exact same curriculum for every subject, but if you don't know and you don't have enough time, or maybe you just don't feel comfortable picking the right curriculum for a math requirement, that was really where, even if you don't purchase anything, they give you a cup of tea, you sit down at a table with other homeschoolers, and you just ask questions. And they have the curriculum there for you, or they can order it for you. I like that because I need someone who knows more about this than I do. And they're so knowledgeable. I have SALA's graduation requirements, just as you said, but there are so many ways to fulfill them. So her non-traditional art course that will take her through all of those years, I just have to make sure that I do a certain number of museum visits, and that she is able to define different creative terms, and that she has experience with completing creative projects on her own.
And that you document.
Yep, and I have. And here is, I keep a spreadsheet for each year. And so for her grade 9 year, and I keep her transcripts attached. For each subject, I have a separate sheet, and every assignment I go through, and this is a requirement, and I was already doing this, so it wasn't difficult to transition into the NCAA requirement. I have always graded her assignments, again, because I really want to make sure that if there's somewhere that we need to maybe do something different, or we need to work more, I want to make sure that we cover that. So I grade each assignment and I keep a record of it. I separate her school year into quarters, and then the transcript then is a little easier. Oh, sorry. And it really is as simple as, for her math requirement, I just put Algebra 2, and then I write either traditional or non-traditional. In this instance, it's traditional for her. And then Saxon is the curriculum that I'm using to identify it to anyone that's looking. And then when you would bring this into the school, or when I do bring this in, and we're up north, so Shane Martin is our homeschool liaison, it's very easy for them to say, okay, for Western Civ, which is a great one for when you get into high school, that's what they're looking for on a curriculum. It's Western Civ 1 and 2. What did you pick for that? I have the more generalized term for the course, and then what did I pick? And that's where you really do have the freedom to choose.
And then when we transitioned into public school, the one thing that I did not know beforehand that I had to collect, and thankfully I saved everything, they wanted representations of Molly's work. They wanted assignments, they wanted writing pieces, and they wanted her tests. So we saved from each of her courses and we took those in. It was a very different process, but they do want to make sure that you do keep representations of the work, keep like a portfolio, because you might need that if they transition to a public school to prove that they actually did the work. Because you can't just write on a transcript
No.
that they took something. You have to have proof that they did it.
Mm-hmm. And we just keep a box for each school year, and that way, if there's ever a question, the goal is always, as I said, we're all here to open doors for our kiddos. And keeping track of things, or just keeping them, makes sure that you're never caught ill-prepared. Homeschool laws seem to change all the time. I always know I'm covered. This isn't the only way to do it, it's just the way that works for me. And then for Selah, because she, again, for her NCAA eligibility, I'm required to have a numeric grading system. So if I say that she actually got an A in something, what does that mean? It means that when I graded her work and all the grades were tallied, that she scored, if she gets an A+, it's between a 96.67 and 100, which is the scale that I was graded on in college. And people always say, well, how do you grade her paperwork or her homework? And it's really, is it right or wrong? And what curriculum are you using? It will usually come if maybe you were using a curriculum that you were not able to quickly grade a homework assignment or an exam, it would come with a solutions manual for you. And
You don't have to be an expert in
No.
everything.
oh no,
That's the scary thing with school.
Mm-hmm.
You homeschool.
Well, we're planning on it. Our daughter is on the Autism Spectrum. She has mood dysregulation. So she's in 3rd grade, and we decided, well, after 5th grade we'd homeschool her, but she's kind of starting to have a few more challenges here and there, so we thought, well, maybe we would we have family that they homeschool, but they use Connections Academy so that they have,
right.
there's no question
Mhm.
as to what they're doing. And that's kind of what we're thinking of doing for a couple of years.
Great.
But we still don't know how it works necessarily, because we want her to go into the school for like gym.
Mhm.
She loves art, so that would be something that we want her to go and do, and like the music classes.
Mhm.
Because neither me or my husband are real musical people.
And that's
But
really easy
those,
to do.
Those are the things that she really likes.
Yeah.
So she'd still kind of have that interaction with her peers, but then, we just want to make sure that, like you said, that she's getting the requirements.
Right.
Right.
Molly, you had something?
I did that for a couple of years. In middle school, freshman year, sorry. I went in freshman, sophomore year, and I think I was over at like Cheyenne. And what I did is I went in for 2 art classes, and I went in and I stayed there during that time at the high school. I took my elective classes, and then I would come home and I would take my 4 classes. So that way I could do those classes, and I would work with the materials I didn't have, because I worked with clay, and that way I worked with the kiln, and then I worked with paints that I didn't have access to. I then also worked with peers that I got that social interaction that sometimes people are concerned that I wouldn't get.
Mhm.
You could do the same with gym, because they do offer gym. And you could do the same in a middle school or
Yeah,
an
I mean,
environment
we
in
have
elementary.
friends that they kind of create their own
Mhm.
curriculum, and they're in West Fargo School District. So their kids come in and they do like gym and art within the school.
The school's very easy to work with. It's very different than when I started. When I started 10 years ago, it was a little bit, the relationship wasn't as easy as it is. And I think that the school has worked really hard on it, and the parents have worked really hard to make that more of a partnership. Some people think that if you're homeschooling, that you're completely against the public school. And there are some people who may, have problems with that, because we've got kiddos who necessarily don't do well. Bobby did not do well sitting in a classroom. I pulled him at the end of 1st grade. Molly was at the end of 3rd grade. And we gave him the individualized education, so he can bounce around the living room and he can take 2 hours to do his writing, and that's okay. The one thing with homeschooling is your kiddo is getting one-on-one attention from you. Molly discovered that, hey, if I don't have to spend my time standing in line, it doesn't take as long to get my work done.
There's a lot faster turnaround time. With homeschool, I do my work in about 4 hours. Public school, I'm there from 8 a.m. to 4. So it's not necessarily a problem, but I also do have 2 hours in the middle of the day where I'm not scheduled for anything. I just stay there. So it's just, it's just the different perspectives. Do you want to be there at home doing your work in a condensed time, or do you want to be there in the school? Both of them work. It's just, what do you want to do?
So, we are non-traditional. I work full-time. I go to school part-time this semester. I was going to school full-time. And we homeschool. So we actually school Sunday through Thursday, because by Friday, I'm dead. Don't ask me to do anything. And my 14-year-old has several health issues, nothing chronic, but she has sleep issues. So in public school, she would lose 2 or 3 days every few months because she would sleep 48 hours straight. And that doesn't work so well in the public school system, but at home, she's able to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and literally she usually wakes up at 11 o'clock the next day. So she gets up, I'm at work, both of the girls have their scheduled what they need to accomplish while I'm not at home. They know that there's no electronics, no TV, no computer until their stuff is done. And then when I get home, we go through what they've done. We do what I need to help them with, the lessons I plan to do with them. And there are days that we finish homeschooling at 10 o'clock at night. So you don't have to school 8 to 3 or 9 to 4. We do it whenever. I also have 3 grandkids that I get a call on the drop of the dime that says, Mom, you need to come get them. So guess what? I pack up the 2 in the car, and they school in the car. So homeschooling has allowed us so much freedom, but yet they're still learning, and it's really fun homeschooling in the car because you're up front and you're not looking at them, but they will sit in the back seat and tell you what they've learned. And it's like, huh, I didn't know that. And so you're learning right along with them. My freshman is just starting algebra because she was 3 years behind in math coming home. And I'm going to do algebra with her because I'm not comfortable with algebra. We're going to do the class together. And then we're going to hit geometry together, and then we're going to hit algebra 2 together. And unfortunately, my 12-year-old is starting pre-algebra this year. So she's going to blow me out of the water in math, but I'll be prepared because I've done it with the older one.
And that's where it's helpful to have people with you.
Yeah.
Because our supported group, when we have problems with different things, like Erin, I have a problem with math. She's like, okay. She doesn't call them math problems, she calls them math awesomes.
She does.
She does.
And Erin actually tutored my junior in college because she didn't get the way that the college was teaching her. Erin took over for me.
Roger, you had a question?
Yeah, for anybody out there, how do you help a child who is on the spectrum, who is being homeschooled, transition into college where it might be a lot more structured than a homeschool?
The nice thing I think with like what we're doing for Bobby is they learn the life skills at the same time. College schedule is very different than what a traditional high school schedule is. I think homeschool actually can be structured before they go to college, where you're like, okay, we're going to do school from this to this, and then this is your schedule. Almost like my college schedule, because I'm in college right now. Like, okay, well, we're going to do these things now, and then we have to do this. And that's just like how it's going to be in college. You're going to do an hour and a half of this. And Bob has actually come with me and sat in college classes, so he sees what it's like to sit in a classroom, and all the colleges will let you do that. Yep. And he's like, that's just really weird to sit there and have to listen to someone for an hour and a half. Like, yeah, most people do that. Because he's so used to teaching himself, because the nice thing with homeschooling is they're hungry. Our kids are hungry for education. And they can get interested in one thing. Bobby learned colors and he learned how to read, thank God, from Thomas the Tank Engine. And then we transitioned, now we're Minecraft and all of those other things. And that helps them be social as well, because they reach out to other kids. And we've got programs in the network. We've got the Game On, which is very helpful. It's a great social group for the kids. And you know that, I think they learn how to function in whatever structure we give them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can structure it like they're going to college the last couple of years. And you can talk to them. We've got colleges here in the area, we're very fortunate. We've gone and we walked around campus. Molly is going to be going to MSUM next year.
That's true.
So it's almost seamless because we're just preparing them for life.
And I think what a lot of people forget is college isn't like public school. You go to class 2 or 3 days a week. You get a syllabus at the beginning of the school year, and you were told when things are due. And if that child wants to work on the particular class they're in for 4 hours in one day and not touch it again, that's okay.
And that's homeschool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how homeschooling is. The other beautiful part is a lot more classes on the college level are online. So these kids can thrive without even stepping onto the campus.
Mm-hmm.
They can learn everything they need to know online, or they can choose to do part online and part in the classroom. So it's not so overwhelming. A child can learn to tolerate a class of 60 people for an hour and 15 minutes, where they probably can't tolerate a classroom with 60 people for 4 hours. You teach them to do things in small steps. I know I've taken my 14-year-old who is, we call her sassy and quirky.
She's sassy and quirky.
I've taken her to class with me, and she sits beside me, and she actually went to health class with me last semester and sat beside me, and class is an hour and a half. And she's like, Mom, this is so boring. I have learned all of this already. And I'm like, yeah, you have, but guess what? I get college credit for it, and I get to pay for it. Where you've already learned it. So when you get to college, and if this is a class that's required for your degree, you'll be fine. But you still have to take the class, you still have to show up. And if you teach these kids the rules slowly, they'll be fine in college.
You know how our kids are with rules.
My 14-year-old is OCD to no end. She cannot get anything wrong. So she is going to be that student who bothers that professor, will stick her hand up in class and say, I don't get it. You need to explain it in a different way. And I've taught her over the years to advocate for herself. That if you don't get something and I can't teach it to you, let's find you a different way. And she is going to be that student who challenges those professors to teach it in a way so everybody learns, because not all students out there are confident in themselves that they can ask that question. And I always say, if you have a question, you have to ask it, because somebody sitting beside you has that same question.
Teaching them how to self-advocate is a big thing, I think, that we do when we're teaching homeschooling. We're teaching them how to be stronger, how to stand up for what they need when they need it. I think homeschooling has been really good for Molly, because she learned, here, Molly, spotlight on you, because when she needed a break, she could take it. Sometimes things are too people-y.
True.
And you need to take a break from the people. And there are times when she does just fine. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling a kiddo with autism, is you get to meet them where they're at. You get to help them push their boundaries slowly. You don't have to have them sitting in a classroom overwhelmed with sensory issues, or how many of our kids can't just sit?
Right.
If you learn best by sitting in the backyard playing with the dog, let's go sit in the backyard playing with the dog, and we're going to learn.
And the great thing about college, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all.
The great thing about college is more and more professors, that's the first thing they ask on the first day of class is, if anyone has issues, if anyone needs accommodations, come talk to me. And I have yet to find a teacher that will not make an accommodation. Be it that student needs to stand at the back of the class, or that student can't be asked a question because they're not comfortable answering it, they get to write it down. But a lot of the professors out there have, through the years, have learned that if we want our children to succeed, they also have to bend. So on the spectrum or not, they should be just fine in college.
College is much more accepting, I've noticed since I'm
Yes.
back, much more accepting of our kids and their quirks. And the other thing that I've noticed, which is fantastic, is all of my professors love when a kid is homeschooled.
They do.
They love homeschool kids because they know how to learn. They know if you get the syllabus, that they're going to know, okay, I have to do this in 12 days. I better start getting that information now. They know how to do that because that's one of the things that we teach in homeschooling. We're teaching them how to learn. We're teaching them how to find information. And that's what college and that's what life is. We're not sitting them in a classroom and just pouring information into them, which I think is hard for some kids to take, right? Which is why this is just such a great way for some of our kids. It doesn't work for all kids. I will say that. It does not work for all kids. I homeschooled my youngest. We adopted him, and I homeschooled him for a while so he could learn to read. He thrives in public school. That's what works for him. Bob will never go back to public school again because he's just very content. He likes his, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. The first one is, how do you transition an elementary school kid that hates school, that hates the public school and doesn't see the point in it, to be motivated learning from you or learning at home? And then is there like a public school like supplement, like a distance ed thing that they can take online classes in mixture with, you know, book learning or?
We unschooled for the first 6 months after we took the kids out of school. We did not have, well, they didn't think they had a lesson plan. I had a general idea of what we were doing during the week. But it wasn't sit down at the table and we're gonna have school. It was, okay, we're gonna go to the zoo. And it's a little more prep work for mom, but okay, because I took Bobby out in the first grade. We go and we study the
Monkeys.
the monkeys. And look how similar you are to the monkeys, and that monkey can't sit still. And you go and you have those conversations, and then he gets interested in learning about the monkey, because the monkey's like him. And then, you know, you have your Legos. We did Legos, and we watched a lot of Science Channel and History Channel, and he got hooked on how it's made. And then he started really being excited to learn what he wanted to learn, and I let him lead. Okay, you want to learn about how engines go together? Great, let's go to Grandpa and let's see what we can do in Grandpa's garage. Let's go to the library and let's get some books. Bobby took apart every single thing in our house. He took apart the entertainment center with the TV still in it because he became fascinated with how things went together and came apart. It was very frustrating as a parent.
True.
But at the same time, it was encouraging because he was getting that interest in learning again. And then we let that happen for about 6 months, and we would go to the library and we'd do all those things. Then pretty soon, he was ready to learn again. And then the other question.
Is there any like supplements through the school, like with
No.
online learning, or?
Well,
is there
they have a new program, I think, that you can have them in the resource room where they do online school in North Dakota.
What do they do?
Yeah.
I've seen that.
But you can, or if I may, you can also, there are distance learning academies, just as you said, Connections Academy.
We do
things
have to
like
pay for
that.
those in North Dakota.
Yeah, pay for those. And then in Minnesota, I don't know if anyone here is from Minnesota, they have larger options for online within your own district.
That you don't have to pay for. I have friends who do Connections Academy in Moorhead, and they do not pay for that. That's just a benefit from the school. We don't have that in North Dakota, unfortunately.
Right.
One of the things that I have done with my kids is, and I don't have it here, I did a curriculum called Switched on Schoolhouse,
Oh, yep.
which it's CDs. I don't think I've got it over here. We used Matthew C. and we used Switched on Schoolhouse for a while. And Switched on Schoolhouse, we just put it in the computer, and Bobby would know, okay, I'm doing Bible. I'm studying this. These are my questions. And he would read the lesson, he would do the questions, the computer would grade it. I would get a notification if there were any essays or anything I needed to grade. And that's how he learned. Matthew C. is a DVD curriculum, where it's a teacher standing up like in front of a whiteboard, teaching them math. And that's how Bobby learned math and how Molly learned math until she went to school. Mr. Demi was great to learn from.
And he actually, my children use Math You See. We tried teaching textbooks, which is also a DISP-based program that grades for you. And my 14-year-old, because of her OCD issues, hated it. Because if she got it wrong, no one was there to help her figure out why she got it wrong.
Right.
It is okay, it's okay to do that too. I think that
Yeah.
I've shown you a lot of detailed work, not to scare you or try to convince you that this is the way, but to show you that you can keep records and then do anything that you would like. If that's not working, you can switch instantly.
Change it
You
up.
don't need to wait until the end of anything. You don't need permission. You know where they need to be. The framework for what requirements they have when they graduate is there. I pulled up the NCAA homeschool toolkit, which is just great to keep your records, even if they're not going to be an athlete. But when you show enthusiasm and you say, I recognize this isn't working, we are agile enough and intelligent enough to pick something that you love to get you where you need to be. That's the heart of homeschool. You mentioned that I don't call them math problems. I love math and I run into so many people who hate it. But the second that you turn the switch on, maybe even if you don't believe it, if you are enthusiastic, a child coming out of public school, I've had different friends, when you shift school from being something that we have to overcome to being something that we control and that can take us anywhere, no kiddo turns themselves off to that. And there are going to be hard days and days where we joke that we kind of lock horns.
Mhm.
It's okay to walk away that day and say we're going to get him again tomorrow. And there isn't a suffering. She's not the poorer for it. That's how life is, and that is how college is. You go and you take a course, and then you come home and you
Sit on the couch and eat a bag of potato chips.
Yes.
Have you guys, do you guys know that, I mean, my kid was pretty defiant in regards to most adults. And
I have one of those.
does a lot with teachers because it's outside of this, the home.
Right.
He and I butt heads on most things, and his first answer is always the defiant answer, even if it is something that he might. So, I mean, are there certain kiddos where this really isn't the best option, would you say? And the thing is then, and if public school isn't an option and they're pretty defiant with their parents, are there some other ways?
I would check into if my youngest is very defiant and it did not work for homeschool with him because he wasn't going to do anything I wanted.
Yeah, and that's.
And you want to make sure that you maintain your relationship with your child. And if it's not working, there are other tools available. I like very much now that they've got in the resource room where you can take some classes. Can you speak to that at all, Molly?
You can take some classes online sitting in your resource room. I know that I've seen some students do it. I haven't done it. You do it and you sit with your case manager, your resource teacher. I've seen it in high school. I never went to a middle school. The thing is, the motivation, you have to be motivated as a student or you have to be pushed by your case manager. So if your student doesn't want to follow instructions, I'm not necessarily sure if it would also be the best choice.
Do they ever provide, would the school ever provide like a teacher to come to the home? If school is not the best place for the child, will they ever provide a teacher to come do work at home or no?
That would be a conversation you would need to have with your child's case manager.
And most likely, though, I would assume not. I would assume that the district.
I'm not certain because I haven't had to go that route. I would talk to your case manager. Do you have DD services as well?
Yep.
Get your whole team together. There are options.
Yeah, because I've been asking for years and people haven't really, they've been kind of dumbfounded as to what the options would be. And then it's always, well, we'll see when we get to that point. And so for me, I like to have information.
A plan,
and
yeah.
everybody's like, oh, he'll be fine by then. It's like, well, no, I probably not. So I'd like to know what it would look like. And I've never really been able to have an answer as to what concretely the options would be. Because
Sometimes that's when Mama Bear has to come out.
What's that?
That's when Mama Bear sometimes has to come out because unfortunately a lot of the times, they've got so many kids on their caseload and you have to be the loud one in the room if you want your kid to be. go to the
And
top.
my concern is that they would say that they have options in the school, even if it's not the best for my son, that they would say that there are options that we provide, and you just aren't choosing to use them. It's my
What school are you in?
Right now, we're at Brooks Harbor in West Fargo.
West Fargo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, I don't know where that is.
Is there an
We're gonna
autism,
go this year, huh?
is there an autism coordinator for Brooks Harbor? Or in the West Fargo school?
It's just West Fargo School District.
Okay.
Is there an autism specialist?
There
is,
There
but
is,
it's for
but
the
it's-
whole system.
it's-
Yeah.
she deals with,
All of the schools. So my
Okay.
son is even listed as having educational autism, which is absolutely positively ridiculous.
Everyone has-
so I was told from Nicole at Family Voices, it doesn't matter if it's listed as educational, if you have a medical diagnosis that they have autism, then you just, I will warn you, we had Cepeda last year at Burger. He's kind of an ass to deal with.
I love them.
Okay.
Till your child starts having problems.
has problems every day. He's under his desk often.
Okay, well, I think, can we continue that conversation after? Let's just kind of, okay,
Thank you.
yeah.
I have a question about assistive technology and what the school's responsibility is in regards to, do they have to provide anything for that? Because my son has dyslexia and dysgraphia and Asperger's, and I'm just wondering if I have any
For
sort of
at home?
resources for at home, when I homeschool.
I don't believe they do.
Okay.
We were told when, because I contacted the school when we were starting to homeschool, because in other areas, if there's an excess of curriculum, sometimes you can get the curriculum from the schools.
Mhm.
And I was told that that is not how the school operated in our area, unfortunately.
Shoot.
Yeah. We have learned to kind of trade with other parents. I've got a box of curriculum that, if you guys wanted to look through it, that, you know, someone had used in elementary school. The Facebook groups where you can trade curriculum, trade ideas. This isn't working for my kid.
Facebook is an amazing resource.
Lots of great support out there
Yep.
if you're homeschooling kiddos with special needs. This isn't working for me. What can I do to have this work for my kid? And other people are out there, and they've, you know, lots of
tried it.
people have tried it, done it. They steer you, and I've received a lot of help that way.
There is a massive amount of Facebook groups that specialize in dysgraphia or dyslexia. And even if your child doesn't have that official diagnosis, join the Facebook group, because someone's going through the exact same thing that you're going through, and we'll have an idea of something else to try, or we'll have an idea of an organization that can help you, where you don't always know that that information is there when your kids are in the public school system, because we assume that
They're getting what they need.
they're getting what they need. And sometimes even if you leave your kids in public school or start them in public school, you still have to advocate for your kids, and you still have to go find those resources. And sometimes the teachers don't know those resources are out there, which no one can know
Everything.
everything. And there's been so many advances in so many areas that if you bring the teacher's attention to this, 9 times out of 10 they'll grasp on and run with it, because the public school system wants you to succeed too.
If there are areas where your kiddos are not feeling successful and not motivated, what are some different things that you guys have done to encourage them to work in those areas?
In subjects?
My 14-year-old, like I said, came home 3 years behind in math. And unfortunately, she was told she would never learn math by a teacher. And we talked with her psychiatrist, we talked with her psychologist, we all agreed negative talk isn't acceptable. And there are consequences to that negative talk. If you have negative talk, you have to cook supper with mom. And when you cook supper with mom, guess what cooking is? It's math.
Math and life skills are very helpful, because that's the one thing that I love,
Yeah.
is they don't realize, we go to the grocery store and they're little, I need the rice that costs the least per ounce. And they're standing there working
Oh,
it up.
wait a second.
Mommy's like, don't go grocery
I have a
shopping.
coupon. Now figure out which one's cheapest.
I need to double that recipe.
We really struggled with fractions, and we still struggle with fractions. So guess what fractions look like? They look like Legos. Legos are a perfect thing to teach fractions with.
And so all of these ideas you just kind of learn over time. 'Cause it sounds like I wouldn't necessarily think of these.
No,
things,
and you
so-
don't, but
And you
you
don't
know what?
Facebook,
Facebook
or your,
pages.
and that's where you meet your
Or,
tribe of women.
hey,
you can-
hey Aaron, Joe's struggling with, and Aaron has a great idea.
And you'll form relationships in those Facebook groups. It will surprise you how quickly you bond with some of those people.
And it's really amazing that your kids will tell you that they're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not. They just have that thought in their head that they're struggling, but they don't realize that they're so far advanced of where they should be. They just haven't realized it yet. There are always ways out there to teach something differently. You as the parent just have to be open to learning those different ways.
You get to be a problem solver.
You do. Or you have your child help you problem solve. Health is a requirement in freshman year, I think.
Oh, yeah. And that's another one that Sayla, we're doing non-traditional.
We are also doing non-traditional health. My daughter came to me and said, I don't want to learn health out of a book. Okay, well guess what my major is? My major is health education. So we are watching documentaries and we are watching TED Talks and we are talking to, we go to a lot of doctor's appointments. We're talking to doctors and they get to ask those questions. And I take both my girls to those doctor's appointments because one of them will have a question that I didn't think of and they're allowed to talk to the doctor. And the doctor doesn't get to leave the room until they answer that question. And that's all health.
But we became
And learning
first
self-advocate.
And learning self-advocacy.
For health, for non-traditional, we became first responders, so we took CPR for infant through adult, and then we're with AED and things like that to just, that's gonna go right on her health transcript. It's just, she enjoys that, and you can always find some way of teaching.
Especially if they're project-based like that.
Yep.
Right.
Some kids, especially our kiddos with autism, are very project-based. And we have to be creative and find ways to make things projects. Bobby's science this year is all, he's making a hovercraft. Great. Here's all your stuff, make a hovercraft. It's all project-based. He doesn't like learning out of books. Find out what gets him excited.
And
Use your kid.
build off of it.
Yeah, build off of that.
Jordan loves animals, and we have biology this year, so guess what? We get to donate our time at the cat shelter again. I'm allergic, by the way,
What a dedicated mom.
but you get to learn genes. What's a regressive gene? What's,
You look at a cat and you say they've got six toes, and then they're like, oh, hey, I know what caused that polydactylism.
And
Yeah.
further,
Like-
Hemingway loved those cats,
Yeah.
so let's talk about
Everything is another step for learning. Clarissa.
I have a question about, I'm just starting in 2 weeks and I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around like where to start because I feel like I have to start in the classes he's in
You don't.
now.
You don't.
And so I'm like, how do you,
have you two learned to like each other yet?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're like
He's a
this.
He's a sweet kid.
Yeah.
He's
he
a
is.
sweet kid.
So he is.
But
Let's talk. He needs to
Right,
unschool
yeah.
a little bit and get
Yeah.
excited about learning
don't
again.
bring your
Okay.
kid home from school and give it a week, and then the next week we're like, we're starting.
Here's your
Circle
worksheet.
time.
No, because
He needs to get rid of that public school culture,
Yeah.
and he needs to start feeling confident in himself again, and he needs to start wanting to learn. And Noah will get that.
That's
Noah
right.
will get that.
Yeah.
Experiences
He's in
for the
sixth.
first while, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
what grade is he in?
6th grade.
Okay.
That's a great,
Yeah.
great
Great time.
grade to
I
start.
think that's a perfect transition.
Yeah. Okay, we are over time.
Sorry.
We could be here all day long.
And I would love to answer any,
We
any questions.
know each other somehow. We do something.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for all the
having us.
questions.
Thanks, guys.
Anybody has any continued questions, you can email the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network thing and I answer that email.